Well, good day and welcome to SOP, Save Our Planet. My name is Gary Willing. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. Now, I always suggest a couple things before I start these videos, and the first is the most important thing that I think that anybody can do upon listening to this information, and that is taking some time out of your day, and it only will take a little bit of time, and doing some investigation for yourself, getting a little bit more background about what I'm talking about here, about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. If you check out the websites that I provided links for in the description portion of these videos, you get really good background information about everything I'm talking about here. But if you go to the Share International site, the link is at the very top, you will get the best background information about what I'm saying about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, get a better sense of whether this information is true from you by going to that site than you will anywhere else. You can even read read articles that Ben's own master wrote about current events of the time. And most of the stuff was written, of course, during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But actually, a lot of the things that he talked about that humanity was going through at the time, that he was giving some insight and some perspective on, you can really translate to what's going on today, really, to be honest. But you will definitely get the best sense of who and what Maitreya is and what he means for humanity from his articles than you will anywhere else. The other thing, too, that I would like to suggest to do if you do go to the Share International site is read letters to the editor that ordinary people such as myself wrote in from time to time about their own personal experiences with Maitreya. And I talk about my own personal experiences with Maitreya, and I've recorded several videos and created a playlist called My Maitreya Experiences on this channel and so forth that you can listen to my own experiences. But I never once said that I was the only person who has met Maitreya already. And there are hundreds of people that I know personally that have written in their own experiences, that have shared their experiences with me personally, and I've gotten my life out of what they've learned and some of those experiences. And you can too if you just read some of them. And it's like, the other thing too that it can do is it might trigger a memory or two that you've forgotten about, an experience that you may have had with one of these masters, by reading some of the letters that people have written in. And this is what happened to me, is my first memory that I have back when I was in the third grade, which was a long time ago, was a time that Maitreya actually came to my school, not to give a talk, but he came to my school when I was eating with my classmates for lunch. And it's a wonderful experience, and you can listen to it, like I said, in my Maitreya Experience playlist, but I had totally forgotten about it. And it was actually months of me reading letters to the editor that something triggered something, and I remember that experience. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So I suggest to you guys to read those things as well. They're wonderful. And like I said, you can really learn a thing or two about the laws of life, because these masters are already teaching us about the laws of life and those kind of things. And these people that are willing to share it, such as myself, you can really learn a lot. So hopefully you'll do it. And then lastly, I do recommend joining the discussion. Post a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a question you want to ask me, post your question in the comment section or email me, searchforscience@mail.com. Okie dokie. Let's start with Anthony. You had a question for me. Intelligence in higher education doesn't necessarily equate to sensitivity and compassion, or does it? What are your thoughts on this? Well, it's a wonderful question. Thank you very much. I would have to say, first and foremost, I think you already know the answer to this question, right? It doesn't, right? I mean, intelligence in higher education, as it's taught today, does not equate to sensitivity and compassion and love, for sure, right? But what's wonderful about you asking this question is it's really showing you that you're a seeker too. You're seeking out the truth that there is love inside of you, that you need to start to express it, however you want to explain it to yourself, right? But it's wonderful that you're asking that question, because you would not have even thought to ask that question to yourself if you weren't already seeking it out. So every time people, and I'm about to address a comment that somebody said, every time people kind of look at the world and like, man, we're good, this is it, and this is how it's going to be, and nobody loves one another, we're not good, on the humanity doesn't have any goodness in them, or whatever you want to say, that cynicism that we all experience and we've all heard before. Just you asking that question proves them all wrong, to be honest. And there's a lot to what you asked, about intelligence, right? I mean, I could talk about the fact that humanity really is the center on this planet where the intelligence aspect of God is known. The masters of wisdom, the kingdom of God, the spiritual hierarchy, lords of compassion, whatever you want to call that group, the kingdom of heaven, to put it in Christian terms, is the center where the love nature of God is known on this planet. And then there's a center above it that we don't really talk about in this channel, Shambhala, where the center of love, or center of will, is known of God in this planet. And the plan is, and it will eventually happen because it's a part of God's plan, is that the first two centers, the center of humanity and the center where the intelligence aspect is known of God, and the center of the love nature of God, will eventually become one. And we really won't be able to tell the difference and the distinction between the two, because we will be so much like the masters of wisdom, but yet all of humanity, that we really, those two centers will become one. And then eventually the higher center, or the highest center on this planet, Shambhala, where the will aspect of God is known, and the other two centers will become one as well. And then we won't be able to tell really any difference between humanity, the masters of wisdom, and Shambhala. And that is the plan. And there's nothing that anybody can do to stop that plan. It is going to happen at some point, because it's within the mind of God himself to have this happen, according to the masters. So, but to put it more on a practical term, you can use your intelligence and your education, for instance, if it's the right kind of education, to enhance your love. And then you become a double threat guy, right? And that's what these masters do. It's been said by certain people that I've heard in movies and so forth that love is a myth. It doesn't really exist. Well, that's not true. Love is an energy. Everything in life is energy, and love is just a part of life, and it's an energy too. And also, if you look at E equals MC squared, which is the theory of relativity from Einstein, that energy follows thought. He was trying to prove scientifically that energy does follow thought. There was a lot to that equation, and that was one of the things that he was trying to prove. And he did prove it in a way. And these masters know the truth of that statement, that energy follows thought, and they use their intelligence, they use their mind to transmit love all the time, and to send love to certain parts of the planet all the time, to individuals, to groups, to nations, to the world as a whole. And they do it scientifically, and they'll teach us the science of the mind and how to use that for good and how to transmit love. They'll also teach us how to love based on the laws of life. And even though we don't see it in the world today, we are that in potential, right? And you're an example of someone taking the first steps, just as some of the other people who have talked about love in their own life. We're all taking the first steps into this world and the truth of who and what we really are to be human. And I don't buy into the cynicism that people have about what it is today will always be because it is today. I just don't buy into that. There isn't anything in life that proves that to be true, and as long as it takes, we will eventually get there. The thing about intelligence and using your mind for love, for instance, right? Well, one example, and I don't know if you're familiar with the painter Rembrandt, who was a very famous painter that lived about 300 or so years ago. He used to paint beggars and ordinary street people. And when he painted them, he made them look very loving and very Christ-like. And one of the things that Ben said that really stuck with me, because Ben was a painter himself, and he's also an esotericist, and he's also has a tremendous insight in different things in this way. But one of the things he said about Rembrandt painting in the way that he did, he was painting his love nature into the painting, using intelligence in a loving way, right? And when he saw these people and he painted them as these Christ-like figures, he wasn't projecting onto him what he wanted them to be. He actually saw them in that way and painted it. Quite extraordinary. But he was, Rembrandt, in his own way, was using his intelligence to be more compassionate and sensitive, right? So you can use it, right? You just have to learn how to do it in that way, right? The other thing, too, to circle back around to the letters to the editor in Share International, I didn't know this woman very well, but I knew her a little bit. And she was a part of a group in Texas that used to go to the conferences like a lot of people did. And I used to go every year for a while to San Francisco and these conferences where Ben was present and so forth. And I just happened to be sitting at a table, and she was telling me about this experience, which she eventually wrote into Share International. But I didn't have this experience. It wasn't my own personal experience with the Master Jesus, but it changed my life by her sharing this with me. That's why I always encourage you to read these letters to the editor. But anyway, she was flying to the conference that year, and there was a businessman sitting next to her who ended up being the Master Jesus disguised as a businessman. And they were sitting there talking, and they eventually struck up a conversation about life and about politics and different things. And one of the things that she was talking to him about, she was complaining about George W. Bush, who was the president at the time. And she said something to the effect of, he is so dumb. The decisions he's making are very destructive, and they're going to hold us back for decades and so forth. And not only the United States, but the world as a whole. And she was right, because that's exactly what happened. But most people weren't seeing it that way. And she was also very frustrated with the fact that half of the people in the United States were going right along with it, or probably even more than half the United States at the time, right? So she was very frustrated. So she was telling this person, who she didn't know until later was the Master Jesus. And what he said to her was, and he was in a way telling her to use her intelligence and her mind in a loving way, or to transmit love, right? But what he said was, imagine or visualize love around George W. Bush. And then she said, well, why would I do that? He's so stupid. Shouldn't I visualize intelligence around him? And he goes, well, it is the love wisdom ray. And the masters will teach us the truth about the 7 rays of energy all throughout cosmos, and we're a part of the cosmos, so we're a part of those rays too. But the second ray is the ray of love wisdom. So he goes, it is the love wisdom ray. But then he said what was very profound that changed my life in hearing it, is he said, it's easier for people to change when surrounded by love. And if he's telling an ordinary person to surround somebody else in love, and that could actually change that help it, make it easier for them to change, right? An ordinary person, right? Imagine what it's going to be like when we're all in the physical presence of Maitreya, the Lord of Love, who literally embodies love. What is that going to do? Well, if I had to guess what it will do for a lot of people who you think are bigoted, prejudiced, angry, negative, fearful, greedy, all the nastiness you could think of somebody, right? They will actually, all that will melt away for some of these people, and they will truly be who they really are, which is a loving person, by just being in the presence of Maitreya physically. I don't think any one of us can imagine what that's going to be like. So just something to think about, something to meditate on and ponder on for sure. But anyway, we can use our intelligence, like I said, for love in that way. We can imagine love around somebody. We can, those kind of things. But the intelligence aspect of humanity, even just in terms of what we're reading, are really just clues to get us there. They're not the actual there, right? They're just clues to get us there. So talking about love, reading about love isn't love. You have to apply it like you're trying, and you have to seek it out like you're trying to do, which is using your mind to, in that way. So yeah, I guess intelligence and higher learning in some way can bring about compassion and sensitivity if that's what you're wanting to learn and seek out, right? So hopefully that helps, but thank you very much for the question. Lovely question. I love those kind of questions. Thank you, Anthony. All right, Fire Heat Light. Thank you. I loved hearing your take on the self and Maitreya's teaching of honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. Yeah, and if you didn't listen to the last video, I talked about that a lot, and it's an important thing to think about. And I'm hoping that if you read Maitreya's teachings on honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, or listen to Ben talk about it or whatever, that you don't just listen to it or read it and just put it away and not do anything with it, but to make it a part of your life. Not a part of your daily routine or weekly routine or monthly routine, but literally a part of your life. It will change your life because that's the truth of who and what we are. We are the self, you know. The other thing I wanted to share based on your comment is a prayer that Maitreya has already given to humanity entitled Prayer for the New Age. And it's a way of also experiencing the self and the truth of who we are as the self, that divinity in which we all share. And Maitreya said it like this, and if you forget it because you're just hearing me say it, you can go to the Share International site and see it printed out and print it out for yourself to help you remember. But it goes like this: I am the creator of the universe. I am the father and mother of the universe. Everything came from me. Everything shall return to me. Mind, spirit, and body are my temples for the self to realize in them my supreme being and becoming. When Maitreya says, I am the creator of the universe, everything came from me, everything shall return to me, he's not talking about Maitreya himself personally. He's talking about the self, which is what I was talking about in the last video, which is the creator of the universe, really. And we are that. We just don't identify with that truth about who and what we are. We identify with everything that we are not. The man and woman in incarnation. You know, I said at the very beginning of this video, my name is Gary Willing, but that's not who I am. I am the self, just as you are the self. Now here's the rub about the prayer for the new age. Okay, so there's always a but. You know what I'm saying? So yes, you are the creator of the universe. Everything you are the father and mother of the universe. Everything came from you and everything shall return back to you. But guess what? Here's the but. Like I said, there's always a but. Everything that we all see in life that is unpleasant or horrific or destructive or what we consider to be evil is all coming from who? You. That will change your life when you really ponder on that. But, you know, Maitreya comes to teach the art of self-realization, and we will learn the truth about who we are, and it will change all of us without exception, but it will definitely change life here on planet Earth, for sure. You know, all evidence to the contrary. But thank you very much. And I'm glad that what I said about the self meant something to you. And it doesn't mean anything really until you apply it to your life and you try and you fail and you try and you fail and you try and you fail. And then you start to see it everywhere. You know, like even reading the Bible, people blow right past what Paul said in Romans. Owe no man anything but to love them. When you love them, you literally cannot harm someone. You cannot lie. You cannot have fear. You cannot covet what somebody else has. You can't murder somebody. You can't do, you know, none of those things, right? That people tried to avoid because it's a sin. You literally can't do that because you love. And the only way to truly love is to realize yourself as the self. That's why it's put in the Bible as love thy neighbor as thyself. Ta-da! So anyway, but thank you so much for that. All right, so let's get on to the last comment because this is quite a long comment. I'm not going to read it all, but I wanted to read a bit of it and talk about it. Marky Jester. I like that name. That's kind of funny. I am typing up a bit of a bulky passage here. I have no idea if YouTube will even let me post it, but we'll see. And I'm going to stop right there real quick. I've had people express concerns about posting comments on my channel, whether YouTube will keep it up or not. I don't think you didn't say anything in your comment that was controversial enough. I think that YouTube would seek out my little tiny little channel and pull it from it because what you said is so disruptive. You know, I only personally remove comments that are disrespectful, disruptive because of the repetitiveness, and I've already addressed what they've said, and they keep bringing it up over and over and over and over and over again. And there's really no reason to keep bringing it up over and over again. Just that you're trolling my channel, kind of, right? And every time I do, I weigh on it for a long time of whether to do it or not. I don't just lightly take somebody's comment down because I don't like what they say, for sure. Because I leave up comments all the time, almost every time, of people who totally dislike what I have to say and have no problem telling me. The other thing that will remove your comment from a comment is when you put in a link to another channel or especially a web page. That will send it right into the spam folder. And sometimes I'll approve it, but most of the time I won't, because it is a link and I don't know what that link is sending it to, so I don't typically do it. So if you have something you say and you want to keep it up there, have it be respectful, have it be on point and on topic and, not disruptive, and don't put a link. But you didn't say anything that was disruptive, so I don't think you have any reason to concern. But anyway, moving on. I think the reason you have left and right is because you have a female and a male. They are fundamental to our biology and behavior. Once you recognize the left is feminine side and the right is masculine side, you start to understand why both sides have the views and behaviors that they do. Thus, you'll understand the political divide better. For example, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read the top part of it. For example, borders, the feminine side wants the borders open because, in a sense, the feminine side is the mother side, the protector of victims, the carer. The baby is the biggest victim possible, but the desire to look after anything considered victim, even if it's not, is a motherly trait. Okay. The masculine side wants the borders closed because, in a sense, the masculine side is the father side, the protector and the provider in his local family and against predators and danger. And I really don't have any quarrel with what you're saying here, but we're going to talk about the feminine and masculine side here in a second. But anyway, and then you said, where is it? Furthermore, if you take too much value away from the masculine side, opportunities in the name of equality value, that's not what I wanted. Oh, that then men being disagreeable, because you said something about women being more agreeable. My wife would definitely disagree with what you had to say about women being more agreeable, because she doesn't agree with pretty much most of the stuff that I bring up. Like, for instance, where to go eat. Hey, let's go eat here. No, I don't want to eat there. Or I like this color couch. No, that color couch I don't like, right? And she usually wins out. But anyway, women aren't necessarily agreeable. But anyway, let me read this last part. This is the most important thing that you had brought up that I want to talk about. Now, what does this have to do with anything you said in the video? Well, that's a good point. Well, specifically, the sharing aspect. It's unfortunately not that simple. As much as I agree with a plan at all, because you're right. We can't keep going on the way we are. And I'm going to stop right there. We can at least see that, right? So that's good. And who would be against sharing resources for the end goal of peace? Well, there's a lot of people that would be against it because it goes against their own personal interests. And you're talking about this in that very same way. Well, just the mere existence of psychopaths already breaks the whole thing apart. Never mind the plethora of different personality traits and the difference in behavior and needs of men and women. You cannot guarantee a country who lists its needs and what it can give will do exactly that without deception. In fact, this is very similar to the Marxist manifesto, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. And again, it's a wonderful sentiment, and nobody could argue with the idea on the surface. It's a very attractive idea, but it doesn't work because people are more complex than that. Even amongst men and women, a select few with specific traits will take advantage of such a situation for their own greedy needs. Once again, I cannot stress this enough. Narcissists and psychopaths, etc. Okay. Especially with it being a feminine ideology, but built on agreeableness. Okay, that's what you were talking about, women being agreeable. It's very easily exploited, even if most people are on board. It's gullible in its assumption that people are basically good deep down. Okay, well, I can't really argue with what you're saying based on what you see today, because, hey, I mean, all evidence to the contrary for sure, right? Maitreya says, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. So everybody, by and large, wants justice, for the most part, as long as it doesn't infringe upon them, right? They don't really care if there's an injustice in the other side of the world because they don't really see it affecting them because we see ourselves as separate, for sure, right? And what you're saying is not anything that I haven't thought of for myself, right? It's that last part of it. Without peace, there will be no future. That is the part that that will wake humanity up. And until we see that our future is dependent upon whether we create peace, we won't ever create peace. And we won't ever try the principle of sharing. The other thing is that, Maitreya has some gifts that he's going to give humanity. And one of the gifts is the gift of choice. We're going to have to make the choice as a humanity. But we have help to make the right decision, to make the right choice. One of the things that he's going to help us with is on the day of declaration, he is going to show humanity in our minds both futures, both potentials. If we continue on in the way we're doing, we're going to be able to experience what it's like to lose our only planetary home. Feel the pain of that. Literally feel it, because it in a way, that future is happening now. From the Master's point of view, all future possibilities are happening at this moment. So he'll be able to show us what he's seeing as a possibility. And then we'll also see what it would be like if we try the principle of sharing. What will that look like? So we have help, to be able to make the right decision. We also, like I was talking about with love, we have his love to help open our hearts to others. And I talked about it in the last video with certain members of the media, but they're just representative of a certain group of people. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who are starting to wake up to the problems of what's going on in Gaza are just representative of a group of people who are noticing the same thing, is my point. And their hearts are opening up a little bit. Perhaps ideologically they still think the same thing, which is probably the case, right? But their hearts are opening up to somebody different than them, which they don't normally do, for sure. And if you look, you can see it kind of opening up for people, right? Will we take a step back here or there? For sure, right? When we try the principle of sharing, will there be a corruption and people trying to take advantage of it? Well, that's just been the way we've always been, right? So sure, people will take advantage of it. But we have help eventually. We will have help from these masters to keep that to a minimum, to eventually root that all out. We will also have the light of Maitreya shining, and we have even just the light of our own media and social media that is starting to expose corruption to make it much harder for people to do things like you're saying. And we're even without the principle of sharing in the discussion, corruption is becoming harder and harder and harder to keep covered up, right? Because we see it all the time. Anybody can pull a phone out and take a photo or take a video and hear just what you usually say, right? And then you say something different, on a podcast. Well, no, you said this so it's very hard for people to see, or it's very hard for people who want to keep things hidden, keeping things hidden. But just because we haven't, as a people, learned to live in peace doesn't mean that we won't. Because there was a time when we were living in peace, actually. We just forgotten all about it. The sociopaths and the narcissist will be here with us for a while. But the vast majority of people are already starting to wake up to the truth of who they are as one, right? They are. I mean, you can see it all the time. Like I said, it's not completely newsworthy. You're not going to hear anybody on the news talking about something that's beneficial. And even when they do, most people turn it off and go to the next thing, right? It doesn't get a lot of play. And videos on YouTube, for instance, that are about really good, loving things don't get a lot of attention. It's all the bad stuff that people are talking about that gets the real attention, right? So it would lead somebody to believe, if you're cynical because you're hearing it all the time and it's being reinforced all the time, then that is just the way things are. Well, in actuality, they're really not. There is other things to life. There's more nuances to life on planet Earth than just all the narcissists and sociopaths run the world. It's all evil. It's all bad. We don't stand a chance. Da 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 da. And you can think that if you want. That's your right. But that's not the truth of it. And when we wake up to the realization of ourselves as one, it will change everything on life on planet Earth. And we are coming to that realization very quickly, much quicker than you think, So just saying. But I appreciate your comment. And I don't mean to shut you down. It's just you gave me something to talk about. And you gave us a lot to think about because you wrote a lot in there, right? Now, in terms of the feminine and the masculine thing being an energetic thing, is it true to say that the Democrats are more feminine than, energetically wise than the Republicans? I mean, the parties have switched so many times. It's like they keep flipping, flopping, and flipping and flapping. And even when Dick Cheney and George W. Bush were in power, and I put them in that order because I do think Dick Cheney was kind of running the show more than George W. Bush, but they were going so far to the right, they were almost coming back to the left, And sometimes the left goes so far to the left, they almost go to the right, and it just, you really can't pinpoint it, right? Now, there is political divisions, right? But ideologically, it's like, where are they? And you can't even really put a finger on it now. So I just think that and you brought up something that is noteworthy, right? You talked about that, you quoted somebody, I don't have the quote in front of me, but that it's because of the failure of the Democratic Party that somebody like Trump rose to power. And that is, I agree 100% and see what you're saying 100%. It is a total failure of the Democrats that somebody like him could even step into power. The problem is that the failures of the Republican Party now, if left alone, could lead a leftist to do exactly what Trump is doing. That's much younger, much more aggressive, and much more capable because they're smarter. And people forget that. There are leftist Democrats, there are leftist dictators just as there are dictators on the right. And who's to keep somebody in the future? And I don't think this is going to happen because I don't think that the situation is going to be like this for very long. But if it was left to its own devices, and what you're saying is true, we're always going to be living in the same kind of world, then it's eventual that somebody on the left is going to do just what Trump has been trying to do and take over the country and just get the cable and all the bills sent to the White House because he's just going to be there permanently, right? So, it could happen. And the biggest fear on the people on the right, and most of the conspiracy theorists that I knew back 30 years ago were all thinking it was going to be somebody on the left, but it's clearly not. And it started really with Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, where they usurped a lot of the Bill of Rights to have this war on terror like they did. And now they're complaining that Trump's trying to do a lot of that stuff, but yet they were the ones that started it, And then, don't get me started on this stuff. I could go on for days, but I love you guys. Thank you very much for the comments and the questions, and keep your head about you, man, and keep your love going, because as Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? Be the change. It's not a rhetorical thing that he said. It's the truth of life. And even what I said about the self, everything that you see in the world is you. As you change, the world changes, for sure. I love you guys. Thank you very much for your questions and your comments, and I look forward, as always, to putting up videos in the very near future. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.